The emergency room at Norfolk General Hospital had never felt this chaotic. Alarms blared, monitors beeped frantically, and the sterile smell of antiseptic mixed with the coppery tang of blood in the air. It was late past midnight, but the night shift staff had been prepped for a busy evening. Still, nothing could have prepared them for the sudden arrival of 3 Navy SEALs. Each carried on stretchers, their bodies battered, bruised, and leaking blood. The gurneys screeched against the tile as orderlies rushed down the hallway, shouting vitals and repeating urgent instructions. At the center of the storm stood Dr. Halpern, trauma surgeon and undisputed king of the ER. His dark eyes scanned the room, calculating every risk, every movement. He barked orders like a drill sergeant. Blood O negative now. We don't have time for hesitation. He waved the night nurses aside, brushing past them as though their presence slowed him. Emma Clark, a nurse with 5 years' experience in the eye, stepped forward cautiously, tray in hand. "Dr. Halpern, I can assist," she began. "Step back, Clark. You're just a nurse." "Stay out of this," he snapped, his voice cutting like a scalpel. Emma froze, nodding slightly, her hands gripping the tray. Most people would have turned away, swallowed their pride, and obeyed. But she didn't. She didn't argue. She simply moved closer, eyes scanning the patients, assessing the damage without drawing attention. The first SEAL, Petty Officer Ramirez, was gray and gasping, his chest rising unevenly with every labored breath. His uniform was shredded, and blood oozed from a gaping wound under his shoulder. The residents froze, unsure, fumbling with tools they had never used in real-life emergencies. Halpern's fingers trembled slightly as he reached for the chest tube kit. Emma didn't hesitate. She knelt beside Ramirez, her hands steady and precise. "Clear the area," she said softly, more a statement than a request. Residents stepped back, confused, glancing at Halpern for guidance. He hesitated. Then he saw what she was doing. Her fingers worked quickly, expertly palpating the intercostal space. The E seemed to fall silent. No alarms, no beeping monitors, not a sound beyond her instructions. In one swift motion, she made the incision, slipped the chest tube into place, and secured it. A hiss of air escaped, followed by a sudden, almost violent rise of Ramirez's chest. Oxygen flooded into his lungs, his color returning to pink. The room erupted in stunned murmurs. Halpern stopped mid-motion, jaw slack, eyes wide. He had trained residents, operated on trauma patients for over a decade, and yet he had never seen hands move with this precision, this calm, in the middle of chaos. "Doc," Ramirez whispered weakly, voice hoarse. Halpern's gaze snapped to Emma. "What did he just call you?" He demanded. His voice was sharp, a mixture of incredulity and suspicion. Emma's expression remained calm. She didn't answer immediately. She tightened the tape securing the tube, checked the vitals on the monitor, and only then looked at him. "Just help," she said softly. No one moved. No one dared speak over her. Halpern's pride bristled, his face flushed. How could a nurse someone he had dismissed perform a procedure he had drilled residents on for months? The second SEAL arrived moments later. His leg was mangled, a compound fracture, oozing blood that slicked the stretcher. Halpern barked orders again, snapping at residents to prep for surgery. Emma moved instinctively, sliding gloves onto her hands, positioning herself to assist, but not as a mere nurse. She guided the team, instructed on compression points, and set up a makeshift splint with precision that came from years of battlefield experience. A third SEAL was rushed in, his face ashen, chest partially collapsed. Panic rippled through the room again, but Emma didn't falter. She assessed him with a speed and efficiency that left the residents in awe. Halpern's ego battled against what he knew his eyes were telling him. This nurse, Emma Clark, had skills far beyond her apparent title. By the time the chaos began to subside, Ramirez was stable, his leg patched, and the third seal breathing on his own. The monitors beeped in rhythm with their renewed life, and the EA fell into an uneasy silence. Halpern turned to Emma, his expression unreadable. "Where did you learn that?" he asked, his voice lower now, almost hesitant. Emma's eyes flicked toward Ramirez, who gave a weak nod, almost as if granting her permission to reveal nothing. "Training," she said simply, almost dismissively. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. The truth was more complicated than anyone could imagine. As the teen cleaned up, whispers began to ripple through the odd. Nurses and residents alike exchanged looks, murmuring, "Did you see that?" Emma ignored them. She had learned long ago that recognition came at a price, and some things were better left unspoken. Halpern, however, wasn't ready to let it go. He approached her quietly while she restocked the supplies. "Emma, I need to know, what are you hiding?" His tone was sharp, but tinged with curiosity. She met his gaze briefly, then returned to her work. "Nothing you need to concern yourself with," she said, her voice steady, but there was a hard edge, a history he couldn't see in her calm demeanor. The night didn't end there. Ramirez needed continuous monitoring, and the other two SEALs required care for trauma-induced shock. Emma moved fluidly between patients, inserting 4 lines, adjusting oxygen masks, and documenting vitals with meticulous care. Her hands never shook, her voice never wavered, but her mind was alert, constantly calculating, anticipating complications before they arrived. For the residents watching, it was a revelation. They had studied textbooks, attended workshops, and observed surgeries, but none of it prepared them for the composure, skill, and quiet authority Emma wielded. Halpern's earlier scorn had evaporated, replaced by a grudging respect and a flicker of awe. He had spent years mastering trauma surgery, yet here was a nurse performing procedures under pressure he could barely imagine. When the immediate crisis subsided, Emma finally stepped back, letting Halpern handle the paperwork and stabilization protocols. She wiped the sweat from her brow, her movements casual, almost detached, but there was a quiet intensity in her eyes that left a mark on everyone present. "Clark," Halpern said finally, his tone measured, "you just saved a life, and I don't know how many more you've saved without anyone noticing. Tell me, who are you?" Emma paused. Her hands hovered over the next patient's chart. She didn't answer immediately. Around them, the EA buzzed again, another trauma incoming. Another day in the relentless life of emergency medicine. But for a moment, the world narrowed to those 2 people in the room, the skeptical surgeon and the nurse, who had just rewritten what he thought he knew about skill, courage, and experience. She finally spoke, softly, almost a whisper. "I've seen things you can't imagine, and I've done things that can't be repeated. I'm just here now. That's enough." Halpern studied her, sensing the weight of her words. There was no bravado in her voice, no need for accolades. Only truth and a lifetime of experience hidden behind quiet composure. The night wore on, but one fact lingered. Nothing in that in all its chaos, could surprise Emma Clark, not anymore. She had faced worse, seen worse, and done the impossible before anyone else could even react. Yet she remained unseen, underestimated, just a nurse in the eyes of the world. And the world was about to learn otherwise. The quiet that followed the chaos in the AI was deceptive. Emma Clark moved from bedside to bedside, checking monitors, adjusting 4 drips, and quietly ensuring the SEALs stabilized. But beneath her calm exterior, her mind raced. Each injury, each procedure, triggered memories she had long buried. She had seen worse in Afghanistan: explosions ripping through tents, soldiers screaming from shrapnel wounds, and blood pooling under helicopters hovering overhead. Here, in Norfolk, the stakes were different, yet the urgency and precision demanded were eerily familiar. Petty Officer Ramirez, still pale and trembling, tugged weakly at her sleeve. I know you," he whispered, voice strained from pain. Emma knelt beside him, carefully avoiding the eyes of Halpern, who hovered nearby with arms crossed. "Where?" she asked quietly, trying to keep her voice neutral. Ramirez gasped, as if the memories themselves were suffocating him. Background, 2009. Aid Station. You were there. You saved 6 of us when the rocket hit. Emma froze, just for a heartbeat, letting the words sink in. Background. That base had been her nightmare and her crucible. A place where she had learned to perform under fire, to make life-and-death decisions in seconds, and to patch wounds with her own hands while chaos tore around her. No one in Norfolk had any idea she had been there. The secrecy of those missions had been absolute, classified beyond comprehension, recorded in files few would ever see. Halpern, noticing her pause, stepped closer. What did he just say? His tone was a mixture of disbelief and incredulity, and Emma felt a flicker of the old pride she had suppressed for years rise in her chest. "Nothing you need to worry about," she said softly, helping Ramirez adjust his oxygen mask. But inside, she felt a storm brewing. That past, hidden behind years of nursing, was resurfacing with the force of an incoming tide. Ramirez continued, voice barely above a whisper. You saved us. While we were pinned down, mortar exploding, medics losing it. You didn't flinch. You patched wounds, carried men to safety. You were a ghost. Emma's hand froze on the side of the stretcher. Ghost. That nickname had been a burden she carried in silence. They had called her Ghost Doc in Afghanistan for her calm precision and ability to operate without hesitation, without being seen. A sudden commotion drew her attention. The second SEAL, recovering from a fractured leg, groaned and began convulsing slightly. His vitals spiked. Emma didn't hesitate. Let's get him stable. 2 milligrams of morphine, now, and prep for surgery if vitals drop further. The residents fumbled, unsure of the precise dosage. Halpern's jaw tightened, his hands hovering in indecision. Emma's voice cut through like a scalpel. We don't have time. Follow my lead. Her instructions were calm, precise, and unshakable. The team moved as one under her guidance, stabilizing the second SEAL. Halpern watched, torn between admiration and disbelief. This wasn't just skill. It was mastery born of experience he could not have imagined. And he knew it. The interns whispered among themselves, glancing at her with wide eyes. Nurses and junior residents were supposed to assist, to follow orders, not command a trauma team with the authority of a seasoned surgeon. Once the second SEAL's condition stabilized, Emma allowed herself a quick glance at Ramirez. His eyes, wide and wet with exhaustion, held recognition and gratitude she hadn't expected. You're really here, aren't you? He whispered. Emma nodded slightly, careful to remain professional. I'm here, she replied softly. That was enough. But Halpern couldn't let it go. He cornered her as the E cleared slightly, his expression unreadable but urgent. I need answers, Clark, he said, voice low. How do you know how to do that? That procedure? That, he gestured vaguely at the chaos she had controlled. Emma inhaled slowly, steadying herself. I trained where no one would ever see me. I worked with people who would be erased from records if they didn't make it back. That's all you need to know. Halpern studied her, the arrogance fading, replaced by curiosity and something like respect. You were embedded, he guessed, his voice quieter now. Emma's gaze didn't waver. I was. That's enough history for tonight. The reality of her past, the classified missions, the lives she had saved in dusty, sand-blown tents, was heavier than anything Halpern could comprehend. She had chosen anonymity, and now the ghosts of that life were surfacing in front of him. The rest of the night blurred into controlled chaos. Another trauma case arrived, a car accident with multiple victims, and Emma moved seamlessly, directing the team, inserting IVs, controlling hemorrhage, and stabilizing patients with a calm precision that left everyone watching in awe. Halpern followed her movements, his earlier skepticism replaced with an unspoken acknowledgement of her capabilities. Emma didn't need his approval. She had survived far worse. Yet she couldn't deny the strange thrill of recognition, even if it unsettled her. Ramirez, now semi-conscious, reached for her hand again. Doc, you saved me then, and you're saving me now. Emma squeezed gently. Focus on healing. That's all that matters. Around them, the interns whispered, exchanging wide-eyed glances. They had seen brilliance, but this was something different, almost legendary. A nurse who had moved in the eye of the storm, unflinching, commanding, and skilled beyond the reach of most doctors. Later, as the aide quieted briefly, Halpern approached her again. Why? Why leave that world behind? He asked, genuinely puzzled. Emma looked at him, her expression unreadable. Because some things never leave you. Every life saved overseas came with a memory I couldn't escape. Nursing allows me to help without reliving war every day. That's enough. Her voice was calm, but layered with the weight of memory and experience that could never be erased. The night carried on, each new emergency, a reminder of the fragility of life. Emma moved like a conductor in an orchestra, orchestrating care, life-saving interventions, and trauma stabilization with unshakable calm. Residents followed her lead, interns absorbed her techniques, and Halpern watched in silent awe. Emma was not just a nurse. She was a force, a guardian, someone forged by fire and blood, yet choosing peace in the sterile halls of a civilian hospital. By the early morning, the 3 SEALs were stabilized, and the EA had returned to its usual rhythm. Staff whispered in corridors, questioning their assumptions. Just a nurse? Did you see that? They had underestimated her, and the lesson would linger. Emma, however, quietly cleaned her station, restocked supplies, and adjusted monitors without fanfare. Her past remained her own secret, one that weighed heavily on her shoulders, yet gave her purpose. As dawn broke over Norfolk, Emma paused by the window, looking out at the pale sky. Memories of sand, gunfire, explosions, and blood flooded her mind, mingling with the sterile lights of the E. She had faced death countless times, in ways most could never imagine. Tonight, she had brought life back, saved men trained to survive the impossible, and reminded the world of her skill without ever revealing its full depth. Halpern approached silently, watching her reflection in the glass. You're remarkable, he said quietly. Emma smiled faintly, not proud, but at peace. I'm just doing my job, she replied. Yet both knew it was more than that. The EA, for all its chaos, had become a battlefield she chose to fight not for medals, not for recognition, but for lives that depended on her unflinching expertise. And as the first light of day filtered into the ward, Emma Clark remained the quiet guardian of life in a world that had no idea of the battles she had fought, the lives she had saved, or the extraordinary skills hidden behind the guise of just a nurse. The aftermath of that night lingered like a heavy fog over Norfolk General Hospital. Emma Clark moved through the ER with practiced efficiency, yet every glance, every whisper of recognition from the staff reminded her of the secret she carried. Her past wasn't just a memory. It was a storm she had learned to cage, but tonight it had briefly broken free. Even Dr. Halpern, once dismissive, now watched her with cautious reverence. He had seen her in action and recognized the unspoken truth. This nurse had operated under conditions he could barely imagine. After the chaos, she slipped into the supply room to collect fresh bandages and equipment. The room smelled of antiseptic, paper wrappers, and a hint of coffee comforting in its familiarity. Her hands moved methodically, arranging gauze and syringes, while her mind replayed Afghanistan with unsettling clarity. Bagram Air Base, the rockets, the mortar, the shrill screams of the wounded piercing the night. She remembered the sand that seemed to seep into everything, the endless sun beating down, and the helicopters vibrating through her chest. Every memory was a ghost she had carried alone. Petty Officer Ramirez's words haunted her. "You saved 6 of us." His trembling hand had brushed hers, and the weight of recognition had pressed against the walls she had built. She had been ghost doc then, unseen, unacknowledged, operating at the edge of danger while the world continued obliviously. But now, that past was brushing against the present. Even in Norfolk, with its clean hallways and fluorescent lights, the echoes of war remained. The hospital floor buzzed again, breaking her reverie. A young resident approached, eyes wide. "Nurse Clark." "The SEALs?" "Everyone's talking." "How did you do that?" Emma straightened, her expression neutral, but her voice carried the calm authority of someone used to being the only anchor in a storm. "I did what needed to be done. Focus on the patient in front of you. That's all that matters." Yet, as she walked back toward Ramirez's bed, her mind wandered. She remembered the moment when the rocket had hit the Bagram aid station, when she had crawled through fire to reach the wounded. The first soldier she patched had clutched her arm, blood coating her gloves, eyes wide with fear. Another had screamed as shrapnel tore through his chest. And still she moved, methodically, cutting, stitching, bandaging, saving life after life while the world burned around her. That was the ghost doc. That was her life before Norfolk. Ramirez, now stable and more conscious, tried to sit up. "You really were there," he murmured, voice still hoarse. Emma knelt beside him, glancing briefly at Halpern, who hovered in the background, curiosity written across his face. "Yes," she admitted softly, her voice carrying a weight far heavier than her words. "I was there." Ramirez's eyes glistened with disbelief and gratitude. You didn't have to, but you did. You saved men no one else could reach." The words stirred something she had buried long ago, guilt and pride entwined. She had walked away from that world, deliberately, choosing a quieter life as a nurse, believing she could help without reliving war every day. Yet now her skills had resurfaced, saving those trained to survive the impossible, and she realized that some part of her would always be tied to that past. Halpern finally stepped forward. "You operated under fire?" His voice was low, almost reverent. Emma's gaze met his, steady and unwavering. "Yes, conditions you couldn't imagine. Procedures you can't teach in a classroom. And lives that depended on quick decisions, not theory." He nodded slowly, digesting her words. He had dealt with trauma before, but nothing prepared him for someone with the combination of battlefield experience, calm under pressure, and quiet authority that she displayed. A sudden alarm drew their attention. Another trauma case was incoming. A motor vehicle accident with multiple victims, some critical. Halpern glanced at her, his previous skepticism replaced by a silent plea. "We'll need your guidance," he admitted, almost unwillingly. Emma nodded, slipping on gloves as her mind shifted seamlessly into problem-solving mode. She moved to the center of the EO, surveying the incoming patients, instructing orderlies, nurses, and residents with precision that left everyone in awe. 2 units O negative on the first patient. Airway secured. Prep for intubation if breathing drops. You check vitals every 5 minutes. Her voice cut through the clamor, calm and commanding. Residents who had earlier doubted her authority now moved instinctively under her instructions. Halpern watched, partly incredulous, partly humbled, as she orchestrated the team. She wasn't just a nurse. She was the conductor of a life-saving symphony, moving with speed and accuracy, honed over years in war zones. As the chaos subsided, Emma paused by Ramirez, who had regained strength but still held her hand lightly. "You didn't have to come back here, Doc," he whispered. She gave a faint smile. "I'm here because someone needs to be. That's all." His eyes searched hers, gratitude and awe etched into every line of his exhausted face. "You saved lives then. You're saving lives now. You're incredible." But Emma knew the reality was heavier. Her training, her past, the lives she had saved in Afghanistan, all of it carried weight she could not discard. That night in Norfolk had reminded her that her skills, though buried, could never truly be left behind. The world had changed, but the need to act, to save life under pressure, was eternal. Halpern approached her again as the E quieted briefly. "Why walk away from that world?" he asked, voice tinged with curiosity and a hint of awe. Emma's eyes, usually calm, flickered with a shadow of memory. "Because the war never leaves you," she said softly. "Every wound, every scream, every life saved leaves a mark. Nursing allows me to heal without reliving it every day." Halpern studied her in silence. He realized that her calm exterior wasn't detachment. It was control earned through survival. The hospital night stretched on, with occasional alarms and rushes, but none as intense as the SEAL crisis. Emma moved seamlessly, connecting IVs, adjusting ventilators, and documenting vitals, all while anticipating complications before they happened. Residents followed her lead, silently absorbing techniques that no textbook could teach. The hospital staff began to whisper, quietly acknowledging what they had witnessed. Emma Clark was not just a nurse. She was something extraordinary, forged in fire, tempered in war, and now operating in civilian halls with unmatched precision. Ramirez, now fully awake and recovering, reached for her hand again. You were called Ghost Doc for a reason," he murmured. Emma's lips tightened in a faint smile, her eyes betraying the faintest flicker of pride. "Ghost Doc," she repeated softly, remembering nights in Bagram when she had moved silently, unseen, saving soldiers who might not have survived otherwise. That nickname had been her burden and shield. Now it was recognition, but not fame. She didn't need accolades, only the quiet satisfaction of lives preserved. The first light of dawn crept through the hospital windows, casting long shadows over the E floor. Emma paused, taking a deep breath. The chaos of the night had faded into a calm routine. The SEALs were stable, the interns and residents were buzzing with new understanding, and Halpern, once dismissive, now regarded her with cautious respect. For the first time in years, she felt the faintest sense of peace, though the ghosts of Afghanistan still lingered in the back of her mind. She walked down the hallway, checking vitals, offering instructions, and observing her team, who now looked at her differently. Recognition didn't matter to her, but respect, earned through skill and composure under pressure, felt heavier and more satisfying. Halpern's earlier scorn had been replaced by a quiet acknowledgement that some things could not be learned in books or classrooms. They had to be lived, survived, and mastered under fire. Finally, Emma returned to her station. She cleaned her tools, restocked supplies, and adjusted monitors, all with quiet precision. Her mind replayed fragments of Bagram rockets, shrapnel, the chaos of war intertwined with Norfolk's fluorescent lights, and the controlled chaos of emergency medicine. She had survived both worlds. And yet, as dawn lightened the hospital, she realized her mission had not changed. Saving lives, guiding the unprepared and moving with calm authority no matter the storm. Even Halpern, standing quietly nearby, seemed to understand. "You're remarkable," he said softly, almost reverently. Emma didn't respond. She never did. She didn't need to. Actions, not words, defined her. And tonight, Norfolk had witnessed a glimpse of Ghost Doc, not the nickname, not the legend, but the unwavering, unshakable presence that had saved lives in Afghanistan and now saved them at home. And as the morning sun rose over Norfolk, the hospital carried on, oblivious to the life hidden behind the calm nurse's eyes. Emma Clark remained unseen, underestimated, and yet unstoppable, a guardian in a world that had no idea of the battles she had fought or the lives she had saved. The sun had barely risen over Norfolk, casting a pale, washed-out light across the E. Emma Clark moved with quiet determination, checking vitals, adjusting monitors, and making rounds with the calm precision that had earned her the whispered awe of staff overnight. But beneath the rhythm of routine, tension simmered. Her past, long buried, was now a visible thread running through the ward. The SEALs had recognized her. Halpern had witnessed her expertise. And whispers circulated like wildfire. "She's just a nurse? Just a nurse?" The disbelief was palpable, and Emma felt the weight of attention she had always avoided. Ramirez, now sitting upright, called her over. His gaze was intense, earnest. "I need to ask, how did you do it? How did you stay calm?" Emma knelt beside him, steadying the oxygen tubing. "When you face the worst, everything else becomes a calculation," she said softly. "You survive by keeping your head clear and focusing on the patient." She wasn't lying, but she left much unsaid. The life she had led in Bagram, the missions under fire, the rockets, mortar, and explosions, it was a world no one in Norfolk could comprehend. Halpern, standing nearby, cleared his throat. "Clark, you need to tell me. You weren't trained here. You didn't get these skills in a civilian ER. Where did this come from?" Emma's eyes met his, calm yet heavy with unspoken history. "I trained where lives depended on seconds, not procedures," she said. Halpern frowned. "I don't understand. Explain." Emma shook her head gently. "Some things can't be explained. You either see it, or you don't. And some of us carry the scars of what we've seen." The hospital hallway was quiet for a rare moment, but the tension hung thick. Nurses and interns whispered behind closed doors, watching Emma with a mixture of awe and disbelief. She had been underestimated her entire career. Tonight, the veil had lifted, and for some, the realization was almost shocking. Emma adjusted in four-line and moved on, keeping her voice calm, her movements deliberate. She didn't need their understanding. She only needed to continue doing what had always defined her, saving lives with precision, calm, and authority. Ramirez watched her, his fingers still weak from injuries, but trying to hold her attention. You left that life behind?" His voice carried disbelief, almost awe. Emma's gaze softened for a fleeting moment, memories flickering across her mind, like fragments of a nightmare she had survived. "Yes, that world. It doesn't leave you. But I chose to live differently. Nursing lets me help without reliving it every day." She adjusted his oxygen mask, ensuring his comfort. Her past wasn't just a story. It was a living, breathing force she carried. She remembered crawling through rubble, the heat of the desert sun on her back, and the weight of soldiers' lives in her hands. One wrong move, one hesitation, and someone would die. The pressure was constant, crushing, relentless. Yet it had taught her to remain calm when chaos erupted, a skill that had just saved 3 lives in Norfolk. Halpern couldn't conceal his growing respect, though pride and skepticism still clashed within him. "So all your skill, You're hiding it because of trauma? He asked, voice low. Emma nodded slightly. Trauma, guilt, memories. Every life saved carried weight. Every death left scars. Nursing lets me live with the balance I need. It lets me help without the constant reminder of what I've lost and seen. She returned to checking monitors, the motion precise, almost automatic. A sudden alarm broke the fragile quiet. Another trauma patient had arrived, car accident, multiple victims, some critical. The A buzzed back into controlled chaos. Halpern's eyes flicked to Emma. We need your guidance, he admitted. She exhaled softly and stepped into the center of the action, her presence commanding. Airway secured on the first patient. 2 units O negative on the second. Monitor vitals every 2 minutes. Prep OR in 5. Her voice cut through the panic like steel, directing residents and nurses with precision that left everyone in awe. Her mind worked on multiple levels, assessing injuries, calculating drug dosages, anticipating complications. Residents who had doubted her followed instructions instinctively. Halpern, usually unflappable, found himself watching rather than directing, realizing the nurse before him possessed a mastery he couldn't have imagined. Emma's calm authority wasn't arrogance, it was necessity, honed in deserts and war zones far removed from the hospital's fluorescent lights. As the chaos subsided, Emma checked on Ramirez. You're going to be okay, she said softly. He grasped her hand, eyes wide with gratitude. You saved me. Again, he whispered. She smiled faintly, the gesture small but meaningful. I didn't save you alone. The team did. But you're stable, and that's what matters. The weight of recognition hung in the air, heavy with unspoken history. The young nurses who had watched the events unfold now approached, hesitantly seeking guidance. Emma spent time showing them proper techniques, precise hand placement, and decision-making under pressure. Her teaching wasn't patronizing. It was calm, detailed, and thorough. The staff began to understand that Emma Clark was not just another nurse. She was a force, shaped by fire and tempered in war, now applying her skills in ways they had never imagined possible. Halpern pulled her aside again, voice quieter this time. Why hide it? Why not take your place as the surgeon you clearly could be? Emma's expression softened, tinged with memory. Because some worlds take everything from you, and some of us choose to heal differently. I've seen too much, done too much. Nursing lets me save lives without losing myself again. Her words were calm, deliberate, but the weight behind them was palpable. The day stretched on, patients arriving, being stabilized and discharged. Emma moved through the ward with precision, each task deliberate, her authority quietly commanding respect. Every glance, every instruction, reminded the staff that this was no ordinary nurse. Emma's past, though still a secret to many, had left an indelible mark on Norfolk General, and everyone who had witnessed her skill knew it. As the evening approached, Emma took a moment to stand by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in muted oranges and purples. Memories of Bagram returned in fragments, the sand, the smoke, the cries of the wounded, but this time she felt a strange sense of control. She had survived both worlds. The ghosts of war were still there, but they were quieter now, subdued by purpose, skill, and the choice to save lives in peace. Halpern approached one last time, voice subdued. You're remarkable, Clark. I misjudged you. Emma's lips curved into a faint smile. I'm just doing my job, she replied. But everyone present knew it was more. Actions spoke louder than words. Lives saved, calm in chaos, and the quiet authority of someone who had faced death and chosen to carry life forward. Those were her truths. As night fell over Norfolk, Emma returned to her rounds, checking vitals, adjusting medications, and preparing the ward for the quieter hours. Yet beneath the routine, a tension lingered. The past had been glimpsed, and she knew it wouldn't remain hidden forever. Ghosts, after all, have a way of finding you, even when you try to leave them behind. And through it all, Emma Clark remained unwavering. Not just a nurse, not just a healer, but a survivor shaped by fire, trauma, and resilience. A quiet force that had saved lives on battlefields far away, and now preserved life in the sterile, fluorescent-lit halls of Norfolk General. The world might underestimate her, but she had long since learned the value of her own expertise. And the ghost doc, though hidden, was still very much present. The following morning, Norfolk General Hospital hummed with a quiet tension that no one could fully explain. The previous night's chaos had left its mark on the staff, who whispered in hushed tones about the nurse, who had moved with a precision and authority that rivaled any surgeon. Emma Clark, oblivious to most of the speculation, focused on her rounds. Each patient she checked, each line she adjusted, carried the same calm efficiency that had defined her during the SEAL emergency. Yet beneath that composure lay a lingering unease. Her past was slowly surfacing, and she could feel it pressing against the edges of her carefully controlled present. Petty Officer Ramirez, now mostly recovered, had returned from the ICU to a semi-private room. His injuries were patched, but the tremor in his hands betrayed lingering pain and residual shock. He called Emma over quietly, glancing around the ward to make sure no one else was within earshot. "I can't stop thinking about last night. About you," he said, his voice low and urgent. "You didn't just save me. You saved all of us. You're different. We've seen people under fire, people trained to survive chaos, but you were calm. Always." Emma knelt beside his bed, adjusting the monitor and checking vitals, keeping her voice soft yet controlled. "You're stable now. That's all that matters," she said. Her eyes lingered on him, a faint flicker of recognition passing through her gaze. She had seen him in Bagram years ago, one of the first to be wounded in an ambush that had taken the lives of 2 other SEALs. His survival was a reminder of what she had carried with her ever since: guilt, responsibility, and a need to protect life at all costs. "Why are you here?" he asked suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You left, didn't you? You left that world?" Emma's expression softened. "I did. I had to. That life. It consumes you if you let it. Nursing lets me heal and help without reliving it every day." Her voice was calm, but the weight behind it carried decades of memory and experience. Ramirez's eyes glistened with gratitude. "Even if you left, it's still you. You're here, saving us again. And we won't let you fade." Across the hospital, the whispers of the staff grew louder. Nurses approached Emma, timidly asking questions, seeking guidance, and sharing the awe that had spread since last night. Residents who had doubted her competence now watched her movements closely, absorbing techniques that no textbook could teach. Emma's authority was quiet but absolute, a force shaped in desert sand under fire, and now applied in sterile hospital corridors with unmatched precision. Halpern approached, his tone subdued, his previous arrogance replaced by curiosity. "You could lead this trauma team," he said. "You have skill, authority. You're remarkable. Why stay hidden behind a nursing title?" Emma paused, taking a deep breath. She had long since decided she would never reclaim her license, never seek the recognition she had earned in Afghanistan. Because every life I saved there carried weight. Every wound left scars. Nursing allows me to save lives without reliving those scars every day. That's enough. The tension in the A was broken by another alarm. A multi-vehicle accident on the interstate had sent multiple patients streaming into the trauma bay. Halpern looked to Emma, his eyes betraying a silent plea. She nodded once, slipping on gloves and moving to the center of the room. Her presence was commanding without arrogance. First patient, airway secured. Blood type checked. 4 lines open. Monitor vitals every 2 minutes. Prep OR immediately if vitals drop. Her voice cut through the chaos. Precise, calm, authoritative. Residents and nurses moved instinctively under her direction, realizing that her orders weren't suggestions, they were lifelines. For hours, Emma orchestrated the care of multiple patients, switching seamlessly between trauma cases, stabilizing vitals, and guiding staff with a precision that bordered on instinctual. Halpern watched in awe, realizing that this nurse, this quiet, unassuming woman, possessed a mastery he could not teach. Her calm authority wasn't born of ego. It was honed through fire, trauma, and responsibility that had no room for hesitation. Ramirez, now fully conscious, approached her during a brief lull. "You were called Ghost Doc overseas, right?" he asked softly. Emma nodded slightly. The nickname had been her burden, her shield, and now it was recognition from those who had truly seen her. "Yes," she admitted. "Ghost Doc," his eyes filled with gratitude and respect. "We called you that because you were always there, unseen, saving lives we thought were lost. That's who you are." Emma's lips curved into a faint, weary smile. The hospital evening stretched on, but the SEALs remained a quiet presence, lingering in hallways or checking on each other's recovery. Emma spent time instructing young nurses, demonstrating techniques, and imparting knowledge that textbooks could never capture. Her teaching was calm, deliberate, and precise, showing patience even as she moved with unmatched efficiency. The staff quickly realized that Emma Clark was more than just a nurse. She was a force, forged in conflict and refined by experience, now wielding her skill in a civilian battlefield. As dusk settled over Norfolk, the quiet moments allowed for reflection. Halpern approached again, voice subdued and almost hesitant. "You have a gift," he said. "Why hide it?" Emma looked at him, eyes steady yet heavy with history. "Because some gifts come with burdens. Every life I saved in Afghanistan came with memories I couldn't erase. Nursing allows me to heal without reliving those memories constantly. That's enough for me." Her calm tone masked the intensity of her past, the countless nights she had spent stitching soldiers under fire, the constant tension between life and death. The SEALs, now stabilized, sought her out individually, offering quiet gestures of respect and gratitude. Ramirez clasped her hand again, his voice low. "We'll never forget you," he said. "You saved us once. You're saving us again. You're remarkable." Emma's eyes softened, a faint smile touching her lips. She had never sought recognition, but the acknowledgement from those who had truly seen her skills carried a weight unlike any other. As night fell over the hospital, Emma returned to her rounds. Patients were stabilized, monitors adjusted, medications administered. She moved seamlessly, a quiet anchor in a world often consumed by chaos. The staff no longer whispered doubt, they watched, silently absorbing the lessons of precision, calm authority, and leadership under pressure. Standing by the window, Emma gazed out at the Norfolk skyline, reflecting on the past and present. Memories of Bagram, the sand, the gunfire, the mortar, the helicopters hovering in chaos intertwined with the fluorescent lights of the hospital, and the steady rhythm of modern trauma care. She had survived both worlds. The ghosts of the past were still present, but she carried them with control, transforming them into a strength that saved lives daily. Halpern approached silently, his voice quiet but sincere. "You're remarkable, Clark," he said. "I misjudged you?" Emma's faint smile was both acknowledgement and dismissal. "I'm just doing my job," she replied. Yet everyone in the room knew it was more. The ghost doc, the woman who had moved through battlefields and hospital corridors with the same calm authority, had proven her worth. Lives saved, respect earned, authority quietly commanded. This was Emma Clark. And as midnight approached, the hospital continued its work, unaware of the depth of history and skill within the nurse, quietly moving among its patients. Emma Clark had survived deserts, gunfire, and chaos. Now she thrived in the fluorescent-lit corridors of Norfolk General, wielding her knowledge and calm authority to save lives, teach others, and quietly command respect. The world might underestimate her, but she had long since learned the value of her expertise, and the ghost doc, though hidden, remained fully present. The night at Norfolk General Hospital had grown quiet, almost eerily so, but Emma Clark knew better. Calm was often the eye of the storm, and in the ER, chaos could erupt without warning. She moved through the hallways with practiced precision, checking monitors, straightening 4 lines, and quietly directing nurses and residents. The SEALs she had stabilized earlier were resting, but their presence silent, watchful reminded her that the past had not entirely left her. She could feel it hovering, like a shadow at the edge of every decision, a weight of responsibility she could not abandon. A sudden shrill alarm pierced the quiet. A massive multi-vehicle accident on the interstate had just sent multiple critically injured patients to the trauma bay. Halpern, now more accustomed to Emma's calm authority, stepped back, allowing her to take command. "Emma, you've got this," he said, voice tense but trusting. She nodded once, slipping on gloves and moving to the center of the action, her presence commanding and resolute. "Airway secure on patient 1. 2 units O negative on patient 2. Prepare the OR if vitals drop." She barked, her voice cutting through the panic like a scalpel. Her calmness radiated authority, guiding the residents and nurses instinctively. Every instruction was precise, deliberate, and necessary. Even Halpern, who had once scoffed at her abilities, now watched, recognizing that Emma was more than competent. She was extraordinary. Her hands moved with speed and accuracy that seemed instinctual. She intubated a patient with a collapsed lung, while simultaneously directing a team to control hemorrhaging in another. Residents who had earlier doubted her moved instinctively under her guidance, their hesitation replaced with focused action. The hospital had become her battlefield again, and she navigated it with a mastery born of experience that no classroom could teach. Between procedures, Emma's mind flickered to Bagram. The memories were sharp, vivid, the rocket-propelled grenades, the screams of wounded soldiers, the relentless sandstorms that made visibility nearly impossible. She remembered crawling over debris to reach a critically wounded SEAL, stitching a shrapnel wound while gunfire cracked overhead. Every second mattered. Hesitation meant death. That training had saved lives, and it was saving lives now in Norfolk, albeit in a different kind of war. Ramirez, now recovering fully, watched her from the sidelines, eyes wide with awe. "Doc, you've done this before, haven't you?" he whispered. Emma didn't look directly at him, keeping her focus on the monitors. "I've been where every second counts," she replied softly. "It's not about heroics, it's about keeping people alive." His hand brushed hers briefly in gratitude. He didn't need to understand the depth of her past. He only needed to recognize the truth of her skill and calm under pressure. Halpern's earlier skepticism had evaporated completely. He followed her movements, silently absorbing every action, every decision. He noticed the subtleties, the way she read a monitor without looking directly, the way she anticipated complications before they arrived, the way her voice could command a room without shouting. Emma Clark was not simply acting. She was orchestrating survival with a precision few could match. As the trauma cases were stabilized, Emma finally allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. The E had returned to a tenuous calm. She walked over to a whiteboard where the night's incoming cases had been logged. Her handwriting was neat, deliberate, almost obsessive in its organization. But the calm was deceptive. She knew this peace would not last. In her line of work, crises rarely announced themselves. They arrived suddenly, unbidden, and demanded perfection. A phone call from the ICU broke the moment. Another critical patient, a construction worker with multiple fractures and internal bleeding, was being rushed in. Halpern looked at Emma, almost pleading silently. "You're taking this one?" she asked calmly. He nodded, stepping back to allow her to lead. Emma's hands tightened on her gloves, and she moved toward the incoming gurney with silent determination. The patient's vitals were critical. Emma's eyes scanned him quickly. Pale, shallow breaths, a deep laceration on his abdomen, and visible trauma to his chest. She moved swiftly, instructing the team. Airway first. Chest tube ready. 2 units O-negative stat. Prep OR if vitals drop. Monitor pressure constantly. Her voice was calm, measured, but every word carried authority. Residents and nurses moved efficiently under her direction, following the rhythm she set. Halpern, standing behind her, observed in awe. "I've never seen anyone move like that," he muttered under his breath. Emma didn't respond. She didn't have time. Every second mattered. Every decision was life or death. She positioned the patient, inserting in 4-line while simultaneously directing another nurse to control hemorrhage. Her movements were fluid, deliberate, almost instinctual. She didn't hesitate. Hesitation meant death. The procedure was long, but Emma's skill and calm authority ensured the patient stabilized. Blood pressure returned to normal, oxygen levels steadied, and the immediate threat passed. The EA staff exchanged glances, realizing that they had witnessed mastery in action. Emma Clark was not merely a nurse. She was a guardian in a world of chaos, a force forged by fire and honed by experience that few could ever match. Later, in the quieter moments after the crisis, Ramirez approached her again. You weren't just a nurse back there, were you?" His voice carried awe and curiosity. Emma met his eyes, her own calm yet tinged with shadowed memories. "No," she admitted softly. "I've seen things, done things. Most people never will. But I'm here now, and that's what matters." Ramirez's eyes filled with understanding. "We call you Ghost Talk for a reason. You save lives in ways no one else can." Emma nodded faintly, the weight of the recognition pressing lightly on her shoulders. She didn't seek accolades. She never had. But acknowledgement from those who had truly seen her, the SEALs who had survived under her care, was different. It was validation of the skills she had honed in places the world would never know about. The hospital's lights flickered as the night deepened, and Emma moved through the EA, checking monitors, restocking supplies, and preparing for the inevitable next crisis. Her past and present converged in this moment. Ghost Doc from Bagram, operating now in the sterile corridors of Norfolk General, wielding skill, authority, and calm precision to preserve life. Halpern approached her one last time, voice subdued and almost reverent. "You're remarkable, Clark. I misjudged you." Emma's faint smile was both acknowledgement and dismissal. "I'm just doing my job," she replied. But everyone in the A knew it was more than that. Lives saved, respect earned, calm authority commanded. This was Emma Clark. The night ended, but the impact of her actions lingered. Nurses whispered, residents observed, and Halpern contemplated the quiet genius of the nurse, who had reshaped their understanding of skill and courage. Emma Clark returned to her desk, reviewing charts, preparing for the next shift, but in her mind, the echoes of past missions mingled with the present. Each life saved was a reminder of responsibility, skill, and the choices that defined her. And as the first light of dawn crept over Norfolk, the hospital remained unaware of the depth of experience, history, and skill contained within the quiet, unassuming nurse who had saved lives in battlefields far away and now preserved them at home. Emma Clark Ghost doc, survivor, healer, she remained a force hidden in plain sight, unstoppable and unwavering. The morning sun had barely pierced the Norfolk skyline, casting long shadows across the hospital corridors, when Emma Clark arrived for her shift. The previous night's chaos, the SEAL's emergency, the multi-vehicle accident, the IQ trauma had left its mark on the staff. Whispers followed her down hallways. "Did you see her last night? She's just a nurse? How did she do that?" Emma moved through it all like a shadow, acknowledging nothing, her focus solely on the patients and procedures ahead. The recognition from her SEAL patients still lingered, but she knew that attention, subtle as it was, could escalate fast. Ramirez, now walking with the assistance of a physical therapist, approached her quietly. "Doc, you're incredible," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "I can't stop thinking about what you did for us. You're not like anyone I've ever met." Emma offered a small, controlled smile, adjusting as the fourth line. "I'm just doing my job," she replied, her voice calm, masking the flood of memories she carried beneath the surface. Yet she felt the tug of responsibility, the SEAL's trust, the hospital's reliance, the expectation that she could handle any crisis. The quiet was deceptive. Within an hour, the E had already received 3 new trauma cases, including a construction site accident and a pedestrian struck by a vehicle. Halpern, now fully aware of Emma's capabilities, stepped aside, letting her take the lead. "Emma, you're in charge," he said softly, almost hesitantly. She nodded, her hands already moving to prepare equipment and brief the staff. "Airway for patient 1, IVs open on patient 2, vitals monitored constantly. Prep OR if necessary." "Follow my lead," she instructed, her tone calm, deliberate, and commanding. Her movements were seamless. She coordinated the team with precision, her mind working on multiple levels, anticipating complications, calculating medication doses, and maintaining a calm rhythm that allowed the staff to operate efficiently. Residents who had previously doubted her authority now moved instinctively under her guidance, realizing that this nurse, this quiet, unassuming woman, was extraordinary. As she worked, fragments of her past in Bagram surfaced unbidden. She remembered crawling through rubble, dragging a wounded SEAL to safety while mortar exploded nearby. She recalled stitching shrapnel wounds under fire, counting seconds like heartbeats, knowing any hesitation could mean death. Those memories, once buried beneath years of nursing, now fueled her focus and determination. Each movement in the IO was informed by experience that no textbook or civilian training could provide. Between procedures, Ramirez caught her eye. "You didn't just save us, you were always there," he whispered. Even when everyone else panicked, Emma's hand brushed briefly against his, a quiet gesture of reassurance. "Focus on your recovery," she said softly. "That's what matters now." But she felt the pull of her past, the knowledge that her skills were in high demand, and the realization that she could never fully escape the expectations placed upon her by those who had seen the ghost doc at work. Halpern approached during a brief lull, curiosity and respect evident in his eyes. "Why hide it?" he asked quietly. "You could run this lead trauma teams, be recognized for what you are." Emma's gaze remained steady. "Because some skills come with burdens," she said softly. "Every life I saved in Afghanistan came with memories I couldn't erase. Nursing lets me save lives without reliving those memories constantly." "That's enough." She returned to her tasks, but Halpern could see the depth of experience, the weight of history, in her calm movements. The hospital doors opened abruptly as a new patient arrived, a young man critically injured in a motorcycle accident. His vitals were unstable, his breathing shallow, and his injuries severe. Emma didn't hesitate. "Airway first. 2 units O negative. Prep OR immediately if vitals drop. Her voice cut through the panic, precise and authoritative. Residents and nurses responded instinctively, following her lead as if her presence anchored them. Halpern, standing nearby, realized he was witnessing mastery that few could ever comprehend. For hours, Emma orchestrated care for multiple trauma patients. She intubated, stabilized, and directed with precision, her mind operating on levels beyond ordinary comprehension. The staff followed, silently absorbing techniques that no textbook could teach. Halpern watched in awe, recognizing that the nurse before him, so calm, so unshakable, had a mastery born not of civilian experience, but of battle-hardened skill. During a brief moment of calm, Ramirez approached her again. "You're Ghost Doc, right?" he asked softly. Emma nodded. "Yes," she admitted. That nickname, once a burden and shield, now carried a different weight acknowledgement from those who had truly seen her skill, precision, and courage. Ramirez's eyes reflected gratitude and understanding. "You've saved us multiple times now, and we'll never forget it." The hospital staff, meanwhile, were quietly buzzing. Nurses approached her, timidly seeking guidance, while residents watched her every move, absorbing lessons in calm authority and life-saving precision. Emma's reputation, long hidden, was beginning to permeate the corridors. Whispers of, "She's not just a nurse," echoed in hallways, and even Halpern found himself compelled to observe her rather than lead, recognizing that she possessed a command few could rival. As evening approached, the SEALs remained in recovery, but their presence in the hospital had shifted the atmosphere. They spoke softly among themselves, casting glances toward Emma with admiration and respect. Ramirez lingered near her station, his gaze intent. "You've done more than save us," he said quietly. "You've shown what it means to be fearless and precise, to lead under pressure." Emma's lips curved into a faint smile. "I'm just doing my job," she replied, though the acknowledgement carried a quiet satisfaction. The night brought another emergency, a multi-car collision with multiple critical injuries. Emma moved seamlessly to the center of the E, her hands and mind coordinating action like a well-oiled machine. She directed intubations, hemorrhage control, and blood transfusions simultaneously, her calm authority keeping the team focused. Halpern, watching silently, realized that Emma Clark was not simply a nurse, she was a force, shaped by fire and trauma, now wielding her experience to preserve life in a civilian battlefield. As the chaos subsided, Emma finally allowed herself a moment of reflection. She moved to a quiet hallway, gazing out at the Norfolk skyline as the sun dipped below the horizon. Memories of Afghanistan, the sand, the explosions, the screening mingled with the fluorescent lights of the hospital and the calm rhythm of trauma care. She had survived both worlds, carrying the skills and scars of each. The Ghost Doc remained, quiet yet unstoppable, guiding lives and commanding respect wherever she went. Halpern approached once more, voice subdued and respectful. "I misjudged you, Clark," he said. "I had no idea." Emma smiled faintly, a mixture of acknowledgement and dismissal. "I'm just doing my job," she replied. Yet everyone in the E knew it was more. Lives saved, respect earned, calm authority commanded. This was Emma Clark, Ghost Doc, survivor, and healer. The hospital settled into a quieter rhythm, but the impact of Emma's presence lingered. Staff whispered, residents observed, and even Halpern contemplated the quiet genius of the nurse who had reshaped their understanding of skill and courage. Emma Clark returned to her rounds, reviewing charts and preparing for the next inevitable crisis, her mind carrying the echoes of past missions. Each life saved was a reminder of responsibility, mastery, and the choices that defined her. And as midnight enveloped Norfolk, the hospital continued its work, largely unaware of the depth of skill, history, and experience contained within the quiet. unassuming nurse who moved among the patients with unwavering precision. Emma Clark, Ghost Doc, remained a guardian, a force of calm in chaos, and an unstoppable presence in the lives she touched. The hospital buzzed with the energy of a typical morning, but for Emma Clark, nothing felt typical. The SEAL's presence still lingered, their silent acknowledgement a constant reminder of her past life. Word had spread quietly among the staff. The nurse, who had handled trauma with extraordinary precision, was no ordinary medical professional. Whispers filled the hallways. "She's a ghost doc, really?" Emma moved through the corridors with the calm authority that had defined her for years. But this morning, the weight of recognition pressed more heavily than ever. Ramirez, now walking unaided, approached her with a mix of reverence and excitement. "Doc, the guys want to talk to you," he said, glancing back toward the SEALs gathered near the observation lounge. Emma's brow furrowed slightly. She hadn't anticipated this level of attention, but she followed him, her hands adjusting her scrubs as she walked. The SEALs stood, silently attentive, their eyes reflecting gratitude and admiration. "Emma Clark," Ramirez began, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "We've been through a lot, and there's something we need to acknowledge. You didn't just save us. You saved lives no one else could reach. Not in Afghanistan, and not here. You are Ghost Doc. You're extraordinary." Emma's expression softened, but she remained measured. "I'm just doing my job," she replied quietly, though the SEALs could see the faint tremor of emotion in her calm exterior. Halpern, observing from nearby, realized the magnitude of what was unfolding. The quiet nurse who had quietly commanded respect for weeks was now being fully recognized by those who had seen her operate at the highest stakes. One of the SEALs stepped forward, a tall man with a jagged scar on his forearm. "We trained, we survived. But you made the difference," he said. "When the rocket hit, when the mortar rounds were flying, when all seemed lost, you were there. You saved men we thought we'd never see again. You're not just a nurse. You're the reason some of us are still alive." The words hung in the air like a revelation, reverberating through the hospital hallway. Emma nodded, voice calm, but carrying the weight of years and memories. "I did what anyone in my position would do," she said. "Every life matters. Every decision counts. That's all I know." Ramirez stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "No, Doc. You went above and beyond. You carried the chaos with control, saved lives under conditions we can barely imagine. You're more than anyone's definition of a nurse. You're extraordinary." The hospital staff, drawn by the murmurs, began to watch in quiet astonishment. Residents whispered to each other, nurses exchanged glances, and Halpern's jaw tightened with a mixture of awe and newfound respect. Emma Clark, who had moved through their halls as a quiet, unassuming figure, was now fully revealed as the Ghost Doc, the woman who had survived deserts, mortar, and explosions, and who had brought that calm precision into civilian medicine. The SEALs gathered closer, their voices subdued but insistent. "We want you to know," Ramirez said, "that you've changed our lives. You've saved men who are fathers, brothers, and sons. You've done what none of us could do alone. You deserve recognition, Doc, not just from us, but from everyone." Emma's hands tightened slightly, her lips curving in the faintest smile. Recognition had never been her goal, yet hearing these words, from those who had truly seen her skill, felt heavier and more profound than she had anticipated. Halpern stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Emma Clark, I misjudged you," he said. "I thought you were just another nurse. I've never seen anyone handle trauma the way you do. Your calm under pressure, your expertise, your leadership. It's unparalleled. We all owe you more than words can say." Emma met his gaze steadily. "Thank you, Dr. Halpern," she replied softly. But it's not about recognition. It's about saving lives. That's all. The SEALs nodded, understanding, yet their admiration didn't waver. Ramirez clasped her hand lightly. Doc, you've shown us something important, what courage really looks like, what leadership truly means, and what it is to save lives against impossible odds. We will never forget you, and we will never let others forget you either. Emma's eyes softened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through her calm exterior. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the weight of acknowledgement, not just from a hospital, but from those whose lives she had directly saved. The hospital staff, witnessing the moment, began to grasp the reality of Emma's extraordinary history. Residents approached, hesitant at first, then more boldly, asking questions, seeking guidance, and expressing awe. Nurses exchanged notes quietly, discussing techniques, strategies, and leadership methods they had observed firsthand. Emma Clark's presence, once quietly commanding, was now fully understood as the embodiment of skill, courage, and precision. As the day progressed, the SEALs prepared to leave, but not without expressing their gratitude. Doc, Ramirez said as they gathered near the exit, you've saved lives, inspired us, and changed the way we see what's possible. We'll carry that with us forever. Emma offered a faint smile, her voice calm but layered with emotion. Take care of each other. That's all I ask. Halpern watched as the SEALs departed, his mind racing with the realization that the quiet nurse he had once underestimated had fundamentally altered the EE's environment. Emma Clark had brought battlefield precision into civilian medicine, and in doing so, she had transformed the perception of what a nurse could accomplish. Alone for a moment, Emma returned to her station, reviewing charts and preparing for the next patient. Memories of Afghanistan returned unbidden, the sand, the mortar, the helicopters, but now they were tempered by acknowledgement, respect, and a profound sense of purpose. The ghost doc, once unseen and unacknowledged, had been recognized by those who mattered most. And though her past remained hidden from most of the world, she knew that her impact would resonate far beyond the walls of Norfolk General. Halpern approached one last time, voice low and respectful. You've changed the way I see nursing, trauma care, and leadership, he admitted. You've taught us all something vital, how to remain calm when everything is chaos, how to act decisively, and how to save lives when it matters most. Emma nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of the truth in his words. It's not about teaching, she said softly. It's about doing what must be done every time, without hesitation. As night fell over Norfolk, the hospital settled into a steady rhythm. Patients were stabilized, monitors adjusted, and the staff moved with a new awareness of what true expertise and calm under pressure could accomplish. Emma Clark, ghost doc, survivor, and healer, moved through the halls with quiet authority, fully recognized by those who mattered, her legacy established in both the hospital and the lives she had saved. And as the final shift ended, Emma took a moment by the window, gazing at the Norfolk skyline. Memories of Bagram, the desert, the explosions, the wounded soldiers mingled with the calm, fluorescent-lit corridors of the hospital. She had survived both worlds. She had saved lives in unimaginable conditions, and now continued to do so in peace. The ghost doc remained, quiet yet unstoppable, a force of calm in chaos, a guardian of life, fully acknowledged at last by those who had truly seen her. Emma Clark, once underestimated and dismissed as just a nurse, had proven herself to be extraordinary, a healer, a survivor, and a legend in her own right. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself a sense of peace, knowing that her skills, courage, and dedication had been fully recognized by those whose lives she had touched, forever leaving an indelible mark on Norfolk General Hospital, the SEALs, and the countless lives she had saved.